National spokesperson Pule Mabe says the party must not be rushed to adopt credentials. This as the delegates at the Eastern Cape's 9th ANC Provincial Conference remain at loggerheads over the issue, which has extended the conclusion of the three-day meeting. For the very latest, we are going to go live to our reporter in just a moment. But first, delegates at that provincial conference are still at loggerheads over the adoption of credentials, and it has delayed the conclusion of this three-day meeting, forcing the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, who was expected to close the conference later today, to postpone it until tomorrow. So let's go live now to Samkele Maseko, who is there. Samkele, good evening and thanks again for joining us. Of course, we've been keeping our viewers updated throughout the day about proceedings there. But for people joining us this evening at 5, we can tell them the conference has been extended. How has this influenced the process and the sentiment of conference goers?
Essentially, Iman, the conference almost descended into chaotic scenes when the adoption of credentials came about, with the chairperson of the session calling for the adoption of credentials. There were some whom are disagreeing, whom are supporting Babalo Matigizela and Teresa Ntutu, as the provincial secretary, doubting and disputing these credentials, stood up and started singing. Conference plenary then had to adjourn for a brief 10 or 20 minutes, as they are still on that adjournment, as the steering committee goes to try and calm down the tensions. And you know that those whom are supporting Babalo Matigizela are saying that some of the delegates whom are here inside this plenary from Dr. R.W. Khubusane region should not be here and should not be part of this conference. That is the bone of contention, which is an odd 105, 106 branch delegates from that particular region, which is pretty much having the issue of the credentials of this conference. As when they started in the morning, they were meant to stand outside, all the delegates, and every delegate through every region comes in with their tag and their ID to check, to iron out and to remove any bogus delegates. That was done. But then the regional secretaries from Amatole, from Nelson Mandela Bay, from Alfred Nzo region, and Dr. Khubusane region chairperson, they then questioned the list that were used in order to have these delegates coming into this conference. That is when the dispute over these credentials, when they were tabled, then started. Then they broke for lunch for the credentials to be cleaned and to be ironed out. And then after lunch, they were resubmitting those credentials to plenary. That is when the issues then arose on the issue of credentials, and that's when conference plenary then almost descended into chaos. They then took this adjournment for the steering committee to further calm the tensions down. Stella Tabeni Abrahams from the provincial talks team says that they are now running out of patience of dealing with this issue, as they have given everyone an ear on what they have to say on these credentials. But conference almost descended into chaos when they called for a mover to adopt credentials and they called for a seconder. That's when the chaos ensued, with some delegates standing up and singing.
Yeah, I mean, it all becomes, you know, sort of very detailed, and this minutiae of these disputes become the key issue. What's the bigger takeaway out of all of this? I mean, we took the story live yesterday, we were in court, we heard what Justice Lang had to say about dismissing that urgent interdict, saying it was an issue that could be resolved later. In fact, the two regions that you talk about that were represented yesterday, again raising the very same issue in conference today. Does it seem as if there's a frivolous attempt at hijacking these proceedings?
Iman, a basic answer. Credentials in an ANC conference tells you who's winning that conference. Anyone who normally doubts the credentials of a conference, in my little knowledge, that person, in most instances, their numbers of winning a conference are slightly lower than their competitor. And if that is the case, they would want their competitors' numbers reduced. In this instance, you've got a court judgment on the Dr. Khubusane region on the branch general meetings in that region. They want those branches and those delegates from that region, which is about 115 branch delegates, for them to be removed. In that instance, it then reduces the numbers of whoever may be perceived to be winning, or it then reduces the chances of those person with those numbers to be neck on neck with their contender, which has an influence and a huge bearing on the numbers game within the conference. Oscar Mabuyane last night, late in the evening, at about 11:15, raised these issues and said if the court judgment had gone against the provincial task team and the ANC, it would have had huge implications for this provincial conference, which would have meant those odd 115, 117 delegates would have been removed from this conference venue and from this conference. Even the ANC, when this conference started, they said that those delegates that are in question from Dr. Khubusane region, they are going to be put into a separate category on the quarantine perspective so that they don't contaminate the rest of the voting delegates of the conference, which would have had a bearing on the conference itself being litigated.
Yeah, and that's a point that we've been discussing, quite extensively over the last day and a half. So I think it's well understood. The sharp end of that point really is that very issue was left to the courts to decide, or at least a portion of it was left to the courts to decide. As you say, it's a closely contested race. Every vote counts. But it seemed to have been resolved in the courts, and now it's raising its head again. So we'll watch to see how that one plays itself out. Just give us a sense of what happens next.
Essentially what happens next is that they will go back to plenary. Those credentials will further be presented to conference on the way forward. What will happen? They will further discuss them. But we are seeing now, I'm just going to ask my colleague, just to show you, our media colleagues are, and we all of us are being, seemingly, they are trying to move us from the conference venue, from the media center, which we are currently situated at, which is directly opposite to the plenary venue, which is on my right-hand side. Should there be any chaos that ensues, we would then be easily able to capture those visuals coming from the adjacent conference venue or media center, which we are currently situated at. So they are now trying to move us away from the center because it easily gives us access to the plenary and to hearing the discussions and to hearing the slogans that are being chanted as some delegates dispute and disrupt the adoption of the credentials.
So it certainly sounds as if anything is possible, and we know that you are an intrepid reporter, Ntsikelelo. You will get the story for us no matter where the media is located. So we'll leave you and the team to do your work. Thank you so much, and we'll be live with Ntsikelelo and the team a little bit later on. So as the curtain falls on the Eastern Cape Provincial Executive Committee elective conference, will this mark the end of a divisive and vitriolic era that was replete with litigation, name-calling, allegations of bribery and voter manipulation? Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast, a political analyst at the Nelson Mandela University, is with us as we ponder what is next for the fortunes of the provincial body in one of the most important sites of power for the ANC. Dr. Breakfast, welcome. You heard, I want to just reflect on some of the developments Ntsikelelo was sharing with us a short time ago. Within a very short period of time, we saw Phule Mabe and Stella Ndebeni brief the media on what's been happening. And to their credit, they've tried to keep an open window on the developments inside, but at the same time, very valiant attempts at trying to reframe all the things we've been hearing from the outside, which we have understood to be chaotic and almost crisis-riven, being downplayed by both Phule Mabe and later, of course, Stella Ndebeni. What's your take on the narrative the ANC is trying to create at this moment?
Yeah, Iman, first of all, I don't think that this is neck and neck anymore. I think the dust has settled, in my opinion. So now we can see which way the wind is blowing, and I can also put my head on the block and use my crystal ball and predict who stands a good chance of winning this contest. And that is informed by the turn of events yesterday in the morning. I think the confirmation of the branches that were left out in the beginning, it does make a substantive difference in the mix. And I, for one, I will not be taken aback if Oscar Mabuyane wins the contest.
And I suppose also what strengthens that perspective of yours, and I would resist the temptation to put anyone's heads on the block, So I'm just trying to assist, and preserve the integrity of your head being attached to your body. But given the developments in court late yesterday around 9 p.m. With Justice Lang giving his decision, which really in a way put a dampener to the cause of Babalo Madikizela to have some, not the quarantine, but essentially having those regions not participate, that fell away. So I suppose that's what's giving credence to your call now. But let's just go back then to what these individuals actually bring to this race and what they bring to the project of renewal and unity for the ANC in the Eastern Cape, its second most powerful bloc.
I presume that they're talking about the two main contenders. My opinion is that none of them brings anything new in the mix, because they were both in the previous PEC, and we did not see any substantive changes with regard to development, job creation, and so on. I think both of them, in my humble opinion, they want to employ political capital in pursuit of personal accumulation in order to have, upward social mobility. I don't think that any one of them, if he ascends to the helm of power, that will translate into development or a change for the better for the majority of the people of the Eastern Cape.
Well, let's talk about, let's stay then with Babalo Madikizela. And as you say, for now, it seems as if, his potency has been neutralized somewhat. So that answers the question I would have asked you about predictions about his chances for the prize position. But he's one of those who was strongly behind a call for a younger leadership in the ANC. Balance that against what Oscar Mabuyane is talking about for focus to be placed, that the party now needs to focus on its fortunes in 2024. These are both critical themes for the ANC, but do you think that these themes are top of mind for the voting blocks within the branches in the Eastern Cape?
Madikizela has nothing to lose. He is at a tender age. If he loses, he can still bounce back with a bang in future. But at the same time, he doesn't strike me as a proponent of the Tumamina brigade. I hold the view that he's a Trojan horse or a vehicle, that is used in pursuit of the agenda of radical economic transformation, because the lexicon that he employs when he speaks denotes that particular, I would say, ideology than what the Tumamina Brigade stands for. Because the Tumamina Brigade, they have their own narrative, state capture, fighting against corruption, growing the economy. He doesn't talk to that. So he speaks right, but he walks left, if I can use the words of Patrick Bond.
Well, let's then come to, the bigger picture as we telescope out of this immediate development within the Eastern Cape, and we'll come back perhaps to the issue around disruption. But I want to go to a comparison, Dr. Breakfast, with what is happening in other countries who rally around, their own candidates for national positions. Are we being too critical of the ANC? Is this common conduct for, particularly powerful parties who might be in government, have their sights set on a particular leadership? So I'd like your perspective from a bigger picture point of view.
Yeah, in terms of comparative politics, I don't want to compare apples with pears. I want to compare apples with apples, because the ANC should be compared with other liberation movements in post-colonial states than with other political parties in general on a global scale. So it's not a Marxist organization per se, it's a broad church. But it does use a Marxist and Leninist organizational model, like democratic centralism. It has a particular tradition of doing things, a particular political culture, organizational discipline. Of course, that is a theorization, unlike other political parties on a global scale. So it has its own ethos in terms of how it does things. But of late, I think money talks in the ANC. It's not about what the party stands for.
All right, I want to end perhaps with this is as a final question. What we're not focusing on as much is that both of these candidates have been tainted with allegations of corruption stemming from the Public Protector's report into the misuse of funds intended for the memorial service of the late Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela. So that report finding that Mabuyane allegedly pocketed 450,000 rand, and that was allegedly used to finance renovations for his East London home. Then there was the other one around Madikizela alleged to have received 350,000 rand, and that money allegedly transferred to the bank account of a company that was owned by his wife. So Mabuyane successfully blocked that report from being handed over to the Hawks for investigation. But again, in Ntsikelelo, we have top contenders caught up in serious allegations of wrongdoing. Surely this can't be helpful to the cause of installing leadership with clean hands, is it?
This is a competition over political power, because if you have access to political power, you are able to get political protection. No wonder both of them don't want to let go of power, because they have been at the helm. The other one was, I think, a treasurer. The other one was a chairperson. So this is extremely important. So it might help them in terms of not being prosecuted and so on. I mean, the issue of corruption, people who purport to be waging a war on corruption, sometimes it's just a theorization. They say that in theory, but in practice, they do something else.
All right, I guess we're going to have a few more conversations before the conclusion of developments down in the Eastern Cape, but we really do appreciate your time. Thank you, political analyst Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast. So we stay with the party, and at least one political analyst believes that the decision to halt the ANC Youth League's elective conference in Limpopo, following also a dispute over credentials, will help restore public confidence in the organization. So that conference was halted last night after it emerged that there were two parallel lists of delegates from a sub-region. The ANC Youth League Provincial Congress Preparatory Committee will meet this Tuesday to map out a way forward, and Pamani Beloy and Llewellyn Carstens filed this report for us.
Delegates and guests at the ANC Youth League Limpopo Congress were seen leaving the conference venue on Sunday morning. The conference started on Friday with the registration process. It was, however, stopped on Saturday night when it came out that there were two parallel lists of delegates from a sub-region in the Bembe region. The Congress Preparatory Committee says it was left with no choice but to postpone.
Obviously, there is cost implication, but if you continue with a Congress that its credibility is being questioned and you go to court, you will have cost which we have already incurred now. You will have cost of the court, and we will still have cost to convene another Congress. It was a painful decision that we should arrive at, because obviously to book for accommodation and food, there was a huge cost related to that.
At least one political analyst believes it was wise to postpone the conference.
The ANC Youth League is a factionalized space and organization, so the ANC mother body has an interest in what takes place in the Youth League. So there could be that the powers that be in the ANC had an interest in what was happening in Polokwane, and they wanted to interfere with the processes. But secondly, we can look at this from a crisis management. I think by disbanding the conference or halting it was a very good move in order to gain public confidence, because we cannot necessarily say it collapsed. I think from a crisis management perspective is a good decision, because the ANC Youth League is a public structure. They need public confidence and credibility, and by seeing those issues of fake list and so on is a serious problem. And so by stopping the conference from going ahead, actually increase their public standing.
The Congress Preparatory Committee will meet on Tuesday to resolve the credentials dispute and set a new date. It is not yet clear if the ANC Youth League in the province will be able to reconvene before the provincial elective conference of the mother body structure scheduled for next month. Pamani Beloy, SABC News, Mokopane.
Public Protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane is in the fight of her career to retain her position as she loses her last attempt to stop an inquiry into her fitness to hold office. This after the Constitutional Court found no basis for her application to rescind an earlier judgment endorsing the rules for that inquiry. So Parliament now has the green light to proceed with an investigation that will determine her fate. Legal analyst Ntsikelelo Breakfast joins The Full View to share some insight on these developments. Good evening and welcome to you, Mr. Ntsikelelo. Thanks for joining us on the program. From your vantage point, all of these court actions read together, would these, in your view, be the last career gasps for Advocate Mkhwebane in this role?
I would say she was only starting. Let's remember that this is the start of the process. There are many other things which are going to unfold as we move on. Firstly, it's the composition of the actual parliamentary committee which is going to sit. One would immediately see that the first attack is going to be on their alleged biasness. If you have parliamentarians who are going to sit in a particular committee, the very first attack would be, you have an interest in this matter. There are various instances in which have been instigated, other municipalities which are led by you, or individuals which are controlled by you from your own political party. So on what basis are you judging based on what has been presented to you? Let's call it the charge sheet, which is going to be the list of allegations. The next stance would be the following, where she would say, if you look at the Constitution, it says that you can only charge me for misconduct, incapacity, or incompetence. In the list of the allegations that you provided herein, there's nothing in which states that. So why am I here? Why am I answering to you on this particular basis? Show me the evidence that I'll be able to move on at a later stage. So for me, I think it's only the start. We're going to see many more legal battles of a similar nature that may even go up to the Constitutional Court if it needs be. But I think for one, I think she should let the process start and then only attack the irregularities when it comes to the procedure that is followed or the substantiveness of the allegations as it moves on. To try and fight and stop this particular sitting from taking place is certainly not going to work. Let's remember, the Constitution allows for a parliamentary committee to be set up. The Constitution allows for the president to suspend her if the president deems fit. So to try and fight all those things is certainly not going to help, but to deal with the substantiveness and the procedure which was followed in checking whether the instances of misconduct, incapacity, and incompetence in the conduct, then maybe she may have a leg to stand on.
As you outline this, and I think that you make, incredibly sobering points around this almost being, base camp of Mount Everest in terms of her struggle and this last mile towards clarifying whether or not she will be retained or deemed not to be fit, is, if you look at the Public Protector Act or the piece of legislation that affirms, her position in this Chapter 9 institution, the concern about the fact that she has to spend so much time litigating. I know the other day she, delivered 11 reports, and the work of the Public Protector's Office seems to be continuing. But is there something in law around being able to focus on the task at hand, given that she is in this sort of tandem battle for both her life and fulfilling the task of her office?
There's nothing directly. However, the request from the President does seem to ask the same question that you're asking, in which the President is saying, the Public Protector, you occupy a very serious position in our Chapter 9 institution. Your institution is important to us in the working of government. In fact, it's one of the only institution that will be able to keep government in check. All departments and all people that render their services under the government emblem. So are you going to have time in order to focus on the allegations which have been, or the process which is starting against you? Or can we leave this particular task to a deputy public protector, for example, so that this important task of the public protector of the country can be served? That is when she must then come in and reply and say, Mr. President, I'm more than capable. I've been handling cases left and right. Meanwhile, I've been able to do my work within the office. Let us look at my track record. Firstly, I'm one of the first public protectors to receive a clean audit. Something which has never been achieved before. Look at the number of reports that I've been able to deliver. Let's look at those reports and check how many of them have been taken to court, how many of them those remedial actions have been actually done and completed. And let's look at the value add. I think when the President called for reasons of why should I not suspend you, That is where the public protector should go to town in leveling all these things and answering the very same question that you are asking, in terms of saying, I'll be able to do my work. I don't need time off in order to complete this particular task. I can be able to do all things, run this particular, attend to this particular committee, and be able to deal with my job as a public protector if it needs be. However, as a precautionary measure, the parliamentary committee, which is where she reports, you can then come back and say, in order for you, instead of you reporting maybe only once or twice a year, and in terms of the work and which you are doing, let us increase those particular tasks, because we want to make sure that the job of the public protector institution, the public protector department, works all the time. So we can't have a situation where it's going to be found limping in certain instances. So we are going to look or focus on you a bit more, so that at the end of the day you are able to deliver on your task.
Legal analyst Mpumelelo Ntsikelelo, thank you very much for talking to us tonight. We appreciate it. Discussing there the legal aspects relating to Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane's fight for her career. Well, let's turn to police matters and the courts now. Police in Mpumalanga have confirmed the arrest of 2 more suspects allegedly linked to the murder of Hillary Gardee. This follows the arrest of a 39-year-old man on Friday evening. The 3 suspects are between the ages of 39 and 52. They face a murder charge, and additional charges are also expected to be added. SABC News reporter Nhlamulo Mabasa and video journalist Lungile Nxumwane filed this report.
Hillary Gardee was the daughter of the former EFF General Secretary Gardee. She was reported missing on the previous Friday. Her body was found in a plantation close to the road to Mashishing by farm workers on Tuesday morning. Gardee was laid to rest on Saturday in White River in Mpumalanga. The police are expecting more arrests.
3 suspects have been arrested. This follows the arrest of 2 more suspects aged between 47 and 52. They have been arrested between Saturday midnight and early hours of Sunday. They will join the 39-year-old that was arrested on Friday. They will appear at the Nelson Magistrate Court facing a charge of murder in connection with Ms. Hillary Gardee.
The Gardee family have welcomed the arrests. They say they hope the suspects won't be given bail.
We welcomed the latest arrest of 2 individuals who are suspected to be involved in the murder of Hillary Gardee. It brings us pleasure to see the police fast-tracking this process and ensuring that those who are implicated are brought to book. And the primary call that we are making is that they must all be, collectively, the 3 suspects, be denied bail, because they have shown themselves to be flight risks, because they've been apprehended either in hiding or fleeing.
The 3 suspects will be appearing before the Nelson Magistrate Court on Monday morning. Nhlamulo Mabasa, SABC News, Mbombela.
A family in Richie in the Northern Cape is hoping that the conviction of a 36-year-old man who raped their now 80-year-old relative will serve as a deterrent. Sizwe Ntwana was slapped with a life sentence by the Kimberley Regional Court for rape, assault and housebreaking.
It has been 2 years since her aunt was raped and assaulted by a man known to the family. Adelaide Maho is relieved that Sizwe Ntwana will spend time behind bars for his heinous crime.
For me, it's fine that every person that rapes a person deserves a life sentence, because also that person have to live with it for the rest of her life.
Evidence that emerged in court reveals that after the rape, the convicted rapist slept overnight at the 80-year-old's home.
Ever since then, she's not feeling too well. She's on painkillers, ointment for the legs. Sometimes she's just shut down and not speaking, or sometimes you just feel like sitting inside the room, not want to come out or want to be around people.
The Ratanang Victim Support Center supported the family in the past 2 years. They attended every court case with them.
This life sentence should send out a stern warning to rapists out there. They can't just do what they want with women. That we won't allow.
Maho says her hope is for the justice system to be as harsh to other rapists like Ntwani. Niria Hlakotsa, SABC News, Richie, Northern Cape.
Just after 5:30, so let's have another look at the top stories this hour. The issue of credentials delays the conclusion of the Eastern Cape's ANC 9th Provincial Conference. The EFF welcomes the arrest of 2 more suspects in the murder of Hilary Gardee and say while they will ensure every resource is deployed to help the case, they will allow the police to do their work. And it's time for a revival, says Boxing South Africa, as it sets its sights on professionalizing the sport across all platforms. And this was our question of the day. Which story stood out for you this week? Leadership says that our system only works for those who got political connections. Hilary Gardee's case is the epitome of all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Since there were about 72 hours activation to capture the murderers, other cases remain unresolved for years now. Shorty Senyolo, good evening Iman and my fellow viewers. The collapse of the Limpopo ANC Youth League elective conference and the arrest of 3 suspects in the murder case of Hilary Gardee in Nelspruit in Mpumalanga. Refilwe Rantlaku says touching tribute messages at Hilary Gardee's funeral yesterday by the EFF President Julius Malema and the goodbye message from the former SG of the EFF, the father to Hilary. May her soul rest in peace. We were actually just talking about that just now. Just to detail those injuries was just so tough to hear Godrich Gardee lay that out. Must have been very difficult for the family. And Duduzo Samilani says, good evening, happy Mother's Day. Thank you. Stories that caught my attention this week. The passing of Gomorrah actor Siyabonga Zubane, known as Stumo. The arrest linked to the former EFF SG's daughter Hilary Gardee, who was murdered earlier this week. All right, do keep them coming, and you can post them onto our social networks as well. We'll read them out as they come through. Up next, your weather.